This podcast is brought to you by Prolongevity, the award-winning 8-week program that can transform the lives of people with prediabetes, type 2 diabetes, and many other lifestyle-related illnesses. Founded by Phillips, the pharmacist who gave up drugs.
Hello, and welcome to the latest edition of the Prolongevity podcast. Now, when I started in this kind of well-being space, my basic interest is in reducing all-cause mortality, so expanding lifespan and health span. And my starting point with this whole journey, personal journey, I suppose, is over about 10 years, is I completely understood that metabolism is related to diet, let medicine be thy food, and so on and so forth. And I thought it was just about diabetes and obesity. Then I realized it spirals into much else. And we've done episodes around cancer. We've done things around hypertension, cardiovascular, and mental health. And then, of course, you bump into new areas and new expertise. And I first bumped into Brian at one of the international keto meetings, I think at Low Carb Denver. And here's this guy talking about red light and saunas. And I just thought, well, it's a nice thing, but it's not particularly scientifically based. Little did I know, 2 years on, here I am, passionate about the use of sauna with one of Brian's saunas recently fitted into my home, and a much greater understanding of the influence of light as well as food on human metabolism. So that's been my own journey. Brian is the chief executive of Sauna Space, and they've got a very interesting approach to sauna and red light and this whole area of what we now call photobiomodulation, to give it its technical term. Brian, please introduce yourself to the UK audience.
Yeah, I'm Brian Richards. I'm the founder of Sauna Space. I am still the acting CEO. And Sauna Space evolved out of my own personal health journey over 12 years ago now. Sauna Space is about 12 years old. Before that, I was kind of at the end of my college career and had some pretty significant insomnia and lethargy and acne. And my mom is actually a general practitioner physician. She's always been very natural focused in her approach. She hasn't done prescriptions in forever. And she was prescribing supplements and vitamins in the 80s in Montana, where I grew up.
So she's a true heretic then.
Yeah, absolutely. She was very much on the vanguard of natural health. There was no one else like her. And, I didn't even really appreciate it that much because my father was a radiologist. He's now retired. What I saw was that my dad was making a lot of money and my mom wasn't.
Yeah, that figures.
So I was like, oh, my dad, he must be more successful. I realized after I grew up how much more successful my mom was and is. And my dad, radiology is a diagnostic entry point into allopathic medicine. And he was specializing in mammography and breast cancer. And, unfortunately, a part of that revolving door concept in allopathic care. So anyway, I called my mom up and talked to her about what I was going through. She kind of knew, and she was like, Brian, you probably just need a detox. You need to get a sauna and do some serious detox. And I was like, huh. And I did my research. It made a lot of sense. A lot of great research on using sauna for detox. And then I discovered Dr. Kellogg's electric light bath. He wrote this book called Light Therapeutics. That was published in 1910 in a forgotten era of light therapy in the early 20th century. And he didn't know about mitochondria or anything like that. He just knew there was something special about the light and that it was a more effective way to heat the body than a traditional like steam sauna or a traditional Finnish sauna. So I read his book where he documents healing over 50,000 chronically ill patients. Hundreds of thousands of sauna sessions he logs. And it's essentially a sauna that's powered by incandescent bulbs. So I built my own based on a more modern doctor's design, just like the concept of it. And I used it right before bed and I slept really well. So really my insomnia was gone in like one session. And that was intriguing.
Absolutely.
And that just led to me using it a lot more for many months, with a lot of discipline almost every day. And I looked back and not only was my acne gone, my energy levels were way better. There were qualitative improvements in my mood, my just patience, outlook, those cognitive functions that are so precious. And also brain fog. I didn't realize I had some brain fog. But,
Mm.
once I cleaned myself up, I was much more aware of sort of this fogginess that I had that I had lifted. So all this happened without doing anything. I just sat on my butt in the sauna in front of these lights. And that was fascinating for me. So that was cool. And that put me on my journey. But the second stage of it was I started making these saunas for friends and family and a few others. You could invoice me through my mom's website, through PayPal. It was really crude. And in the first 3 months or so, I had this one customer who called me crying, and she relayed this beautiful heart-centered story about how she got her life back using my product, how she had an onset of fibromyalgia and was really challenging for her family. It was really stressful. She couldn't go out of her house. And using the sauna I had made for her for about 3 or 4 months put her in such a better state that she got her job back. The stress went away from her relationships. And she's calling me. I'm like tearing up too. And I had a realization there. I was like, whoa, there's something divine I'm channeling here. I need to not be doing what I was doing then, which was rental real estate. So I dropped my tools and went all in and formed the company and did without a business background, but a lot of passion and a mission to empower others to be well. I started Sauna Space and that was 12 years ago.
It's a fantastic story. And I suppose there are some parallels with me because for 20, I've been in practice 40 years nearly. 25 years of those I practiced conventionally, basically spooning tablets into people. And I was very good at it. We won all these awards. But ultimately, I thought, I'm just spooning medication into people where they get fatter and sicker, just more slowly. And I just started to think, like, what's the point? And then I bumped into the low carb community and I changed my own health. And it made me completely reframe the paradigm with which I saw health and longevity. And my inspiration, I mean, you're quite right. I made a lot more money after spooning tablets into people than I do now getting them off all the medication. It's true. But in the end, you have to ask yourself why you're a health professional in the first place. What drives you? I'm coming towards the end of my career now, but like the last 5 years of my career have been the best that I've ever had. Because what I'm starting to see is the light coming back into my clients' and patients' eyes in a way that never happened with the medication. And I guess it's like the story you just described. When you see someone's like, the light, it's not necessarily the weight loss that you see. It's the light coming back into people's eyes. It's the kind of, you almost feel like you're breathing fresh life into people. And it's so much more satisfying. So it's a lovely, lovely story that you've given us. And I guess that what drives us forward against all adversity.
Yeah, it definitely had its challenging moments, but certainly there's always been that beautiful reminder of how impactful it is on people's lives. If you go to our website, sauna.space, and just look at some of the reviews, they're very long, in depth, sort of tour de force healing journeys. There are very few people who say, just review on how fast it shipped or arrived as expected. It's really transformative. And
Mm.
I used to think that I was healing people, the sauna was healing people. And then I realized eventually that no, the sauna is a tool and the light therapy is a tool to remind people and their bodies on how to heal themselves. And when
Yeah.
people realize that, they're like, oh, I have this divine design. My body is trying to work perfectly. And it just needs these simple things to remind it of what it's designed to do, what it wants to do. It takes care of itself quite nicely
Yeah.
without the use of chemicals
Yeah.
and aggressive interventions. And
Yeah.
the simplest answers are for the body are really the right ones. They're the biologically or divinely designed ones. Sunlight, grounding, no blue light after dark. Don't eat anything that didn't exist over 100 years ago, or 200 years ago. these types of simple things, and then avoid anything that's synthetic of any kind. And that becomes more and more challenging,
Yeah.
in the modern world, how to adhere to a lifestyle that I've just described. But the understanding of it, at least, and how to do it is pretty straightforward. You don't have to go into the PubMed and read all the science and literature. It's very achievable.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I always say to people, at its most fundamental, just think about evolutionary biology. And I mean, our primary concentration is on diet and nutrition. And I always say, if you eat a species appropriate diet, the body will do the rest. You won't be hungry, you won't be fat, you won't get diabetes, your mitochondria will be happy, and so on. But I think it's absolutely right. We've become so entrenched in an environment. I always say we're basically cavemen living in a space age, and things have moved much quicker than human biology possibly could. We think in terms of hundreds of years for evolutionary change. And yet, look how much it's changed just in your lifetime or my lifetime, and our biology can't keep up. And if we go back to the sort of history of to get as close as we can to nature in all the ways you've just described, I think basically disease more or less goes away.
Yeah, it totally does. But it is challenging to get there, especially, I live in Florida. I go to the beach every day and I'm getting lots of sunshine. But I also, in contrast, I'm at the computer a lot,
Yeah,
getting a lot of, and it's not just blue light, it's the whole energetic concept of staring into this portal
yeah,
of there where there's information flow back and forth that I really need to balance that out with doing a lot of things to heal myself. And if we talk about the modern synthetic world, one of the biggest challenges is our exposure to environmental toxins having increased so much over the last, just in the, like you said, just in the last 20 years with the new chemicals and this whole new generation of nanotechnology. And that's in now being used in agriculture and pharmaceuticals. It's really everywhere, as well as genetically unmodified organisms like genetically modified yeast and E. coli and other things that all is this toxic tidal wave that is something our ancestors didn't have to deal with. So that's why I'm so happy to have stumbled upon what I did so long ago, because sauna still presents itself as like the number one most efficient way you can detoxify. And I think that's why, generally speaking, that and its rejuvenation effects on the cell is why it's the only known therapeutic that's associated with a health span extension. So it's increasing the years of your life that you're healthy.
yeah, yeah. So your background, I think, is originally did chemistry. Is that your undergraduate, your graduate
Yeah,
degree
I did
was chemistry?
undergraduate. I did organic chemistry and worked in an OChem lab. I
So, I mean,
synthesized.
as a pharmacist, I've done a lot of organic chemistry. Do you
Yeah,
think it shaped your whole approach to the design of sauna space and your view of the science?
it definitely taught me a lot of discipline and
Yeah,
a lot of work ethic. It It also taught me what I didn't want to do. So I was working in an organic lab. Organic synthetic labs are kind of the most toxic in terms of the reagents that are
yeah.
used for different things. And I actually had a few exposures where I remember this one time there's these little plastic clips that hold the glass componentry together when you're doing a dilution or whatever, or an extraction, and the plastic clip blew off and I had dichloromethane, DCM, blow into my face. And I had to use the shower to rinse off. And I'm wearing the purple gloves and I'm looking out the window and there's all these people out there playing frisbee golf. And I'm inside in this lab trying to synthesize this novel fluorescent protein dye. And yeah, I realized I didn't want any part of that aspect of science. Nor was I very interested in being a medical doctor. My parents are medical doctors, and
Hmm.
I was definitely that approach to me didn't make sense. There's no root cause like approach in any of it. And And really, it was, I never looked for it because I was doing rental real estate. But once I started doing sauna space, I realized that it was what I really wanted in the first place. I wanted to be involved in wellness and health and healthcare. But from a solutions perspective and in product development, I found my niche.
Absolutely. So we'll get into a bit of the weeds, but I'd just like to do the top line really. What would you be your elevator pitch for the benefits of sauna?
Well, sauna reduces your risk of dying of all things, non-trauma related. So it doesn't matter what your disease is or what your afflictions are, what your complaints are, it will improve them. It's the only known therapeutic, as I mentioned, that increases health span. It's the only known therapeutic that significantly decreases dementia. And these are in long-term, large human population studies that now have been going on like 30 years. So it helps you live longer and healthier and makes your brain work better, which are two, I think, just huge things nowadays with all the problems that we have in the neurodegenerative space and
Yeah.
also in the mental health space. But beyond that, it is like, how is it doing it and why is it doing it? It's doing it in two ways. Once it's cleansing the body, it's helping the body remove poisons. And poisons are things that don't belong in your body. They're not designed to be there. And when we remove things that are not parts of us, that are not supposed to be inside of us, it allows us to be more of ourselves, if that makes sense. If we're going to be in our highest expression, in our human optimal, our physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual optimal state, we can't have anything, or as much as possible, anything that doesn't belong, whether it's a trapped emotion or heavy metals. The sauna is really uniquely central in helping the body unlock the deepest toxins, way more than anything else, way more than just a chelator or a binder, although those are great to combine with sauna. It's helping the body intelligently detoxify at the cellular level in the deepest organs from the inside out. And then you're leveraging the skin as the primary detox organ. When you activate it, you start sweating and you're activating the lymphatic system. So on the one hand, it's getting the poisons out of you. And on the other hand, without getting into the weeds, there's this effect of cellular reoptimization that occurs through the heat shock protein response. So we're cleansing the body and we're making it work better through sauna. And that's kind of like, that may be still a little bit too much in the weeds to zoom out. That makes you feel better. You sleep better. You have more energy. Your immune system is stronger. So you're more resilient and less apt to come down with an infection or something like that. If you do come down with a cold or something, you can recover faster. It's just every organ system in the body you can think of, whether it's the eyes or the cardiovascular or the brain or the lungs or whatever, it's being improved in its function and its resilience through frequent sauna use.
Okay, so I, ha- you know, I hate this term that everyone uses, detox. Like everyone, it's used for everything always in a meaningless way. But actually, I think in the case of sauna, it's a meaningful use of the term. Maybe say a little bit more about the mechanisms of the detoxification. Because most people would say, well, that's what your kidneys are for.
Yeah. So certainly grab your body is detoxing all the time. In other words, your body is trying the cells, the tissues, the organs, the whole body is trying to cleanse itself. There's systems that are working all the time to do that. The liver is the body's, the blood's primary filter. The kidneys are used to excrete urine, excess nitrogen, and some waste. And then, of course, our bowels. When we eliminate through our bowels, we're eliminating waste. What's special about sauna, the heat of the sauna activates what's called a heat shock protein. It's a special cellular actor that isn't active at resting body temperature. You have to heat the cells up by a few degrees for a few minutes at least. When you do that, the heat shock proteins get produced and they make cellular detox more efficient. And they also repair misfolded proteins. That's where the cellular reoptimization comes in. They move proteins around, they refold and repair proteins, they improve the proteome. So they're improving, like, the proteins are the line workers of the body. So these heat shock proteins are coming out and making them all work more efficiently and better. Now, In terms of the detox, once we activate and accelerate cellular detox, then the toxins go out of the cells into the lymphatic system, which is like the sewer system of the body. And then from there, as much as possible, these toxins can be released through the skin, through the sweat glands. So instead of our body as normal having to process toxins through the kidneys, through the liver, through the bowels, we can kind of eliminate the toxins through the shortcut pathway of the skin, through sweating. So if we're not in the sauna and we're not passively sweating, we're not doing this unique way of detoxing where we accelerate cell detox with the heat and then we sweat out most of the toxins as much as possible. Even if we're in the gym or we're running really fast and we're sweating a lot, all of our cellular energy is used for movement and all the oxygen and stuff. It's not being used for cellular like detox, repair, regeneration. So there's a big difference between running on the treadmill and sweating in the sauna. When we're in the sauna, we're doing this deep detox. In contrast, if you take some kind of supplement that helps you detox, you're basically helping detox what's already in the gut or what's already in the blood to some degree. You're not so much accessing these toxins that are hidden in the cells in the body. And the body's deepest locked up toxins are in the fat tissue and in the organs. When we eat something that has a lot of heavy metals in it or a lot of plastics, a lot of toxins, and in order to prevent our blood and our body from being overwhelmed, our liver basically grabs these toxins and stuffs them into fat, moves them through a process into fatty tissue. And our body hides the toxins in fatty tissue so they can't damage anything else. So it's all about using sauna to access those deeply held toxins in whatever forms they are. And there's really not any other toxin detox approach that addresses this so much. And also, as I said, using sauna gives these normal ways of detoxing like the liver and kidneys and bowels and liver, it gives them a break. It lets them sort of rest for a while because they're working 24 hours a day. There's basically 4 ways you detox. There's bowels, kidneys, sweating, which we talked about, and breathing. And so 3 of those you're doing all the time automatically. But the 4th one, sweating, you have to intentionally get into some type of sauna to do. When you do that, though, you are doing a profoundly deep level of detoxification that you're not doing in any other way.
I think that's well put. So there's that. I guess there's 2 sides to this, really. There's the detoxification, which you've covered, and then there's the energetics. Now, I think most people think of the human body as like a car. You put the petrol in, you turn the petrol into a vapor, you apply oxygen and a spark, and you end up with carbon dioxide and water and energy. Simple, right?
Yeah, sure.
And there's an extent to which, if you look at the Krebs cycle and oxidative phosphorylation, there are parallels. But actually, human metabolism is far, far, trillions of times more complicated than that. I mean, you produce your own weight in ATP each day, which possibly we'll get into. So let's discuss the other side of it, because all of us who are trained conventionally just understand that we basically burn fuel. Calories come in, we burn them, and that's it. And we learn something around the production of ATP, which is the energy currency of the cell, and not very much more than that. And certainly none of us who are trained in medicine, you're quite right. We have no training in nutrition or sleep or exercise, right? All of our training is symptoms and drugs. And we're also given no training in root cause. So we know that society is getting fatter and sicker by the day, but we don't give any thought to the reasons behind that. We just try and treat the symptoms, right? I always say it's like people are drowning in the river, right? So what we do as health professionals, we wade into the river, and every so often we pick somebody up and sling them on the riverbank, and 2 other people go in and drown, rinse and repeat. And I'm saying, why don't we go to the mouth of the river and try and work out why people are falling in the first place? Root cause. And that's what's never done. Well, I understand now that actually we're a lot more sensitive to light I mean, I understand now the sensitivity to food, to micronutrients. So it's essentially, yes, you need some calories, you need some energy, but our very, very complex metabolism is based on the balance of macronutrients, but more so the micronutrients, the vitamins, the proteins, the amino acids, the fats, the minerals, the trace elements in the diet to run our metabolism well. So I got to that point, and then people like you and Huberman and Rhonda Patrick have made me completely rethink the bioenergetics relative to light and how that works on mitochondria. So let's sort of start off with the principles and maybe go a bit deeper into how the body generates energy in the context of light rather than the context of food as a fuel.
Yeah. So the sun nourishes all life on Earth. And it's good to start out with, what do we get from the sun?
Yeah.
And our ancestors got lots of sunlight for the most part every day. If we look at the sun, it's an incandescent light source. So that means it's a broad spectrum encompassing all wavelengths, pretty much all the wavelengths from ultraviolet light and even X-rays to visible light to infrared, which is the long wavelength section of the sun that we don't see with our eyes. But if we look at the sun spectrum, it's not equally distributed. 40% spectrally, but 70% in terms of power absorbed is in the near infrared band. So just beyond visible red light, we get into this infrared range, the long wavelengths of the sun. And the first part of that is called near infrared. It's like the highest energy. It's the highest frequency of the hidden infrared light. And near infrared is, again, over 70% of the sun's wattage. So the vast majority of our stimulation from the sun is near infrared. And it's in this wavelength band that we find some very unique, interesting relationships with our biology. One is what's called light therapy, or in the science, it's called photobiomodulation, which just means light controlling biology. So, the scientists and doctors were always trying to use Latin to confuse people, but it just means that. It's very simple.
Fancy name for that. Yeah.
Fancy name for that. So that's the use of red and near infrared light to heal damaged cells and optimize function of healthy cells. And the way this works is the mitochondria, which are the little powerhouses of the cells that produce most of our cellular energy, they have a light receptor enzyme on them that absorbs wavelengths of light from the sun. So this is kind of trippy. Photons, the energy units from the sun or of light, enter in and are absorbed by this protein in the mitochondria, and they're converted into electrons. So light energy is turned into like cellular electrochemical energy. And this results in some very interesting effects in the cells. Number one, it increases cellular energy production. And number two, it increases directly nitric oxide release out of the cell. And then there's this other thing where it causes production of reactive oxygen species. In these three direct effects, we then have all these other indirect effects that are called the mitochondrial effects, or the mitochondrial functions. And there's a fascinating group of effects that occur here. Inflammation reduction occurs, regeneration occurs in the cell, anti-aging effects occur in the cell. So we're repairing how the DNA is read, how the cell makes new parts of itself, and how it regenerates itself. And then the nitric oxide release causes vasodilation. So you get more blood flow, more oxygen delivery. You get the activation of the nitric oxide cycle in the body. And nitric oxide is also an immune response agent. So it boosts your immune system. So there's all these like really incredible things that happen merely by the correct wavelength of light hitting this light receptor. So all that to say that we humans are like plants. And it used to be said that we get energy indirectly from the sun by eating plants and eating animals.
That's what I always believed. Yep.
But the reality is we get directly from the sun through this effect. So you might find if it's summer and you get a lot of sunlight, you're less hungry. You don't need to eat as much food. And the sun, if we get like many, many hours of sunlight a day, like 3 or 4 hours a day, if the sun can satisfy like 2/3 of our caloric needs. Like that's how much energy we can actually get directly into our cells. And there's even in some cultures, in like Ayurvedic cultures in India and in Asia, there are these light eater cults they're also called breatharians, where you basically drink a little bit of water and you get tons of sunlight and you don't eat any food
Wow.
at all for like a really long extended periods of time. So, and then you find in the winter, less sunlight, there's more of a desire to eat denser, more energetically dense foods. So we can get all this energy from the sun, but it also feels good. People who live in climates where there's lots of sun are happier. And
Yeah.
actually the incidences of autoimmune disease are lower, in the equatorial regions of the earth. So it's not just energy and healing that the sun's providing. It's also spiritually and energetically, it puts us in our flow state. Makes us feel grounded and relaxed and calm and sort of where we're supposed to be, belonging where we're supposed to be. So all that's just happening in terms of light therapy. And then beyond that, there's also this effect of the thermal infrared, which is also starting in near infrared, which is how our product works, where the sun through the short wavelength infrared, the near infrared, heats you radiantly. So the sun is penetrating, these wavelengths of near infrared are penetrating into the body. And when they're not activating mitochondrial functions, they're being absorbed by water. And they give us thermal heating, radiant heating of the body. So they heat us from the inside out, and that feels good. Heat, as we've discussed, has so many benefits to the body. Beyond the detox and stuff, it increases blood flow, increases oxygenation of the tissues. It kind of increases mitochondrial efficiency, so energy production increases and everything kind of liquefies and works better in the cells. There's different effects in the brain, like production of brain drive, neurotropic factor. There's just all these different things that we're supposed to get light and heat together as we would normally get it from the sun. And there is even very small cellular systems, like there's heat gated ion channels that structured water can sit on and then be activated by near infrared light and upregulated. So that's in the weeds, but there's examples of light and heat clearly biologically intending to work together, in our cells at the cellular level. So we have this relationship of light that goes back a long time. And eventually humans developed fire to basically recreate our own sun. And then after the advent of fire, at some point there was the development of sauna. It was like this ancient tradition now that almost every human culture has, where, hey, let's sit in an enclosed space, let's heat ourselves up. You have the Turkish baths, and in Mesoamerica, you have the Temescal ceremonies, which actually may go back, may even be like antediluvian in origin, like very, very old traditions of heating the body up for physical and spiritual cleansing. But the light aspect is probably the most important. We talk a lot about food, and you focus on food a lot. Light is food, and light is probably our number one nutrient. It does all these things for us. It heals us. It gives us energy. It makes us feel good. We know it has beneficial effects on our circadian rhythm and our sleep when we're getting it according to a sort of a natural light diet. And then we know, in contrast, if we get a lot of exposure to blue LEDs, all this modern indoor lighting, it wrecks our biology. It ruins our sleep. It makes us stressed out, increases fat, weight gain. It makes us depressed. Working at the screens makes everybody psycho. It's like the exact opposite, so of what the light we're supposed to get outdoors, the biologically coherent.
Fantastic. So I'm just going to pull up a couple of things then, because you just mentioned BDNF. And in the earlier part of the conversation, you talked about dementia risk. So let's dig into that a bit more, because I think there's been a huge change. If you go back 10 years, they talked about the big C. They wouldn't even say the word cancer, because simply saying it was too scary. I'm not sure that was the thing in the States so much, but certainly in the UK.
It was, people are still hesitant to talk about, yes, that subject. It's kind of taboo.
And we've had some success, although it's a lot more limited than people actually realize with cancer, and the incidence of cancer is growing like topsy. But that's a discussion for another day. I'd like to talk a bit more about dementia, though, because none of the drugs work. I mean, none of the drugs work,
None of them.
right?
Yeah.
There's one drug that was approved recently in the States and hasn't been approved in the UK. And most people think that the FDA, the drugs regulator in the States, has been completely captured by the industry. And a lot of people on the committee resigned because the evidence for the drug was so marginal as to be an irrelevance. The death rate from dementia is rocketing, and the other neurodegenerative disease, the one that's accelerating the fastest actually is Parkinson's. And red light, there's a lot of evidence for the use of red light in Parkinson's. And a lot of people don't realize that within 10 to 12 years of a Parkinson's diagnosis, people typically also get a dementia diagnosis. And when you look at the root cause of the problem, which is problems with mitochondrial dysfunction, the electron transport train, in other words, the way that the body uses energy, you can see the links. So talk a bit more about that, because I think that's absolutely fascinating. And we've got no other answers for it. It's not like we've got another solution. We really haven't.
Yeah. The people focus a lot on one organ system or the other in try, if I've got leaky gut, or if I've got edema, and then we're going to look at the cardiovascular system or the lymphatic system. And if I've got tinnitus, we're going to look at the ears. And it seems like more than anything, the nervous system controls everything else. It's kind of the master controller of all the other organs. And if the nervous system is stressed out and dysregulated, the body really is challenged at healing itself in whatever organs or areas of the body are, we're seeing symptoms. So how do you shift focus from just trying to treat one organ or the other to realizing that for there to be any real detoxing or healing or improvement, that the nervous system needs to be addressed first? And so relaxing the nervous system and improving the health and the functioning of the nervous system, I think, becomes key, not just for people who are dealing with neurodegenerative disease, but people who are dealing with everything. So both sauna and red light and near-infrared light present themselves as very effective, safe tools to squarely target the nervous system and improve its function. Sauna, the BDNF production is interesting. That's kind of it's a very important enzyme, basically, or a protein factor for your brain. It's kind of like Miracle Grow for your brain.
Oh, that's nice.
And the effect of heating the cells, the nerve cells, increases this production. So it's an immediate benefit. But there's also a fair amount of research in the use of sauna to improve autonomic nervous system function, and also improving and helping people's recovery who have things like spinal injury, and people who have TBI, traumatic brain injury, which is not just in the brain. You can have traumatic spinal cord injury and just trauma to the nervous tissue, to the nerve cells. And then, of course, light comes in, which is really interesting, because one of the most well-researched benefits of photobiomodulation, of red and near-infrared light, shining it on the body, is amelioration of neuropathies, recovery from stroke, and recovery from TBI. There's tons of studies now on war veterans and athletes and so many others, just in the TBI, in the topic of TBI, and how much improvement people are getting. And that's because when I mentioned that using light therapy, we can promote cellular regeneration and also have these anti-aging effects. I'm talking about us doing that in the nerve tissue too. So that's in the nerve cells. And if we're talking about doing it in the brain, one important caveat to note is that red light doesn't go very deep in the body. Red light doesn't go through bone tissue. The red light is very superficial in its application. It's absorbed primarily by hemoglobin and melanin. Those are two chromophores that suck up red light. Near infrared light, in contrast, so the wavelengths of infrared just beyond red that we can't see with our eyes, which again form majority of the sun's power we get, those are the only ones that go through the cranium, for example, into the brain. So if we want to promote this regeneration in the brain and also the deep organs of the body, we have to use near infrared. When we use near infrared, we see some really interesting things happen. We get cellular regeneration of the nerve cells, the brain cells. The cells themselves work better. And then we see improvement in how the cells work together. So the organ function improves. With heat and with the light therapy, we get improved. Oh, I forget the name of it. What's the glymphatic system
the glymphatic
of the
system,
brain?
yeah,
So the brain has its own specialized blood flow and its own specialized like waste drainage system because it's so active. It's using so much energy all the time to do so much. And so we're improving the functioning of all that so the brain can take care of itself. And also there's interesting, if we're talking about like dementia, there's some relationship between dementia and brain problems and plaque, the development of these like amyloid plaques that you can see in brain scans in the brain. And they're associated with Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and dementia and so forth. And just one clinical study I find interesting is that you take near infrared light and shine it on the skull, and it causes the release of mesenchymal stem cells from the cranium that go into the brain and break up amyloid plaque. And if we take that and we combine that with the effects of heat, right, the effects of sauna, where we're helping in its own way to heal the brain and promote cellular detox and detox in the brain as well, clearly we're going to get some kind of benefit. And so again, what I said in the beginning is very powerful. Sauna reduces your risk of development of dementia. And I feel what it's doing there is what I've described. The reason our bodies are not working anymore is because health is a function of harmony or disharmony in the internal environment. And it's the poisons in the brain, the heavy metals, the aluminum, the pesticides like Roundup, and also other crazy nanotechnology like graphene oxide and all this stuff like clogs up and gunks up everything in our body. And that when we become weaker because we have more poison in our body, that makes the man-made electromagnetism like cell phone and Bluetooth and Wi-Fi, it causes more stress to our cells and to our nervous system, more peroxynitrite production, and just more, it makes us weaker and weaker. And so each of these things on their own are maybe not terrible, but together result in an overload of stress on the body. And so if you look at pretty much any neurodegenerative, like natural wellness oriented clinic that's around these days, they're all using sauna, they're all using red light and combining these two together. And I know you mentioned cancer before. There's not a single cancer clinic in the world that doesn't have some type of whole body hyperthermic therapy. Most of them have sauna as a core detoxification protocol. And these advanced diseases, in my opinion, they're not caused overnight. They're long. They're a long time coming based on a long, the human body has such a powerful constitution. It can take so much toxic burden, so much stress load and keep going and keep going. So it takes a long time to get there. So there's not like resolution overnight with this stuff, but people are seeing incredible results with it. And there's really, as long as you're not overdosing it, there's no known side effects of photobiomodulation. And you can't say that about any pharmaceutical out there. And with sauna, there's really no side effects either, other than what are called healing reactions, where you can sometimes have toxin detox reactions, where you experience symptoms of a toxin as you're detoxing it. So to manage that, it's again, just like the light therapy, we don't overdo it. But if you don't overdo either of them, you do them all with just consistency and moderation, you only have benefit. And there's not really a contraindication for anyone except maybe pregnant women, which I think personally is just a liability. Like, it's pretty much anybody of any in any physical or health state is going to benefit from it. Even minors, even children for limited durations can use sauna, as you see, traditionally in Scandinavia and also
Yeah.
elsewhere.
Fantastic. So I just want to emphasize a point because I think it's easy for it to get lost, which is we assume that like it's all dark inside our skull. You've got this great big bone, nothing could get through. And there's a ton of evidence now that if you shine the right wavelengths of light, this near infrared light, it can penetrate deep into the brain, and you can actually show by a whole variety of different mechanisms and tests, you can show improved energy production in cells. And it's also interesting to note that if you shine the light on one part of the body, you can show improved energy usage in another part of the body. And the reason is because the mitochondria, it turns out, they can fuse, they can move together, they move around the body, they're quite free flowing in the bloodstream. So there's a fantastic study that shows if you irradiate your left palm with near infrared light, the energy and the mitochondria in the other opposite arm works better. Some of the studies are quite fascinating. There are also fantastic mice studies. Now, you can do things with mice that you can't do easily with human beings. You can get clones of mice. So you've got 50 identical mice here and 50 identical mice there. Everything about their lives is controlled and it's identical. They've got the same food, they've got the same everything. One group is irradiated by natural light. The other group is irradiated by the sort of LED light that most of us are sitting under on a daily basis. And guess what? The ones who are irradiated by blue light get fat, they get diabetic, they get dementia, right? Premature aging, and the other group doesn't. So the studies, because none of us as health professionals are ever taught any of this, but the evidence is absolutely there. So we've kind of talked about heat and light as if they're one thing. But actually, where does it begin and end? Because you've got this whole area of photobiomodulation, but you've also got the benefit of traditional sauna, which is just the heat. Are they separate? Are they the same thing? Is there a continuum? Does one add to the other? What does optimum look like in terms of heat and near infrared?
Yeah, good question. So light therapy is a different mechanism than heat therapy in the cells. And so when we talk about light therapy, it's a very specific wavelength band of 600 to 1,000 or 1,100 nanometers. So it's a visible red light that you see in about half of the near infrared spectrum that is unseen. Once you get beyond 1,000 nanometers in terms of getting heat from light, you start to get water absorption. So water starts to increasingly absorb wavelengths of light as we get farther and farther into infrared. But in the beginning there at 1,000 nanometers, there's a kind of like partial water absorption of light. So the latter part of near infrared, which is 1,000 to 1,500 nanometers, you're still in near infrared. We call that radiant heat because those wavelengths are going 4 or 5 inches into the body and then being absorbed by water on average and essentially heating the body from the inside out through deep penetration, radiant heat. Once we get farther out in the infrared spectrum into what's called mid and far infrared, beyond 1,500 nanometers, far infrared starts at 3,000 nanometers, water begins to absorb light 100% once you get out there. So these longer wavelength infrared, mid and far infrared, they're not going deeper into the body than skin deep because they're 100% absorbed by water. Our bodies are 99% water volumetrically, 70% water by weight. So we have a lot of water in our bodies. So those wavelengths don't penetrate deeply, but they still do heat us from the outside in. It's more of a superficial heat, which is so the far infrared wavelengths like you have in far infrared saunas, regular infrared saunas, they're essentially heating you from the outside in through a conductive heating process, not radiant heat. And that's how a regular sauna heats you. In all of these saunas, that's why you preheat it. The air gets really hot and the hot air slowly heats you from the outside in. And whether we're using a traditional sauna, a far infrared sauna, or a sauna space sauna that uses near infrared light, the goal is the same. If you look at the long-term longevity studies and dementia studies, we want to get two outcomes. We want to sweat out 1 pound of water, and we want to raise our core temperature about 3 degrees Fahrenheit. If we do these two things, we've had a great sauna session. If we do that 1 time a week, it's amazing. If we do it 3 times a week, our risk of all-cause mortality drops another, 30 or 40%. So with heat therapy, what we're trying to do is heat up the temperature of the cell by a few degrees for enough time that we get the body to start sweating passively, and we get like a lot of sweat come out. So 1 pound, half a kilo of lost sweat. So you can measure that if you're really left brain. You can weigh yourself on a scale before and after a sauna session. You'll know how much you sweat out. You can measure yourself with an instant read infrared thermometer to get a sense of that. But once you do sauna for a while and you get used to this, you can see, you can feel. That's how much, when I'm sweating a certain amount, I've sweat out a pound of water. So that's the goal in all sauna sessions. With heat therapy, it's just a question of how do we heat the body. Some people like traditional sauna. They like the steam. They like the hot rocks. There's the Temescal ceremonies, which are fantastic. It's like 3 hours in the stone tiny, sauna, like rock sauna that is used in Mesoamerica. They're in there for hours. And sometimes in the Russian banyas, they're in there for hours. But in terms of moderation, safety, and precautionary, yet effective approach, just the 3 degree temperature increase, the 1 pound of water is all you need to get those benefits. And so the only difference in how you heat the body is with what we do with sauna space using near infrared light, using an incandescent bulb of our own design called the Firelight. We don't need to preheat the air. You just get in, you turn the lights on, and you're sweating very quickly. With our regular sauna, our classic sauna, the sessions are 30 to 40 minutes. With our super sauna, the sessions are like 15 minutes. So it's just a faster heating of the body, and the results are achieved faster. But if we wait long enough in any heat source, including a hot tub or a hot pool, we can achieve those same results. And so heat therapy and light therapy are definitely different cellular mechanisms, but there are some really interesting synergies that we should mention, especially that I've discovered being in this, in this space of doing light and heat therapy for a long time. So some more advanced aspects of light therapy. Light therapy promotes antioxidant production in the body. So the sun is not just fueling you and regenerating and promoting anti-inflammation. It also promotes production of melatonin in the cells. 94% of the body's melatonin is produced in the cells through the stimulation of near infrared light, either from a man-made light source or from the sun. And melatonin is one of the body's most important antioxidants. It's not just a sleep hormone, but also it's not just melatonin that's produced. Also, glutathione production is stimulated. And glutathione is really popular now in the sauna world. There's a lot of people saying, take glutathione before you get in the sauna, because glutathione acts as a binder. It's an antioxidant, but it also helps the body like bind and eliminate heavy metals and toxins. You don't need to take glutathione in a supplement if you have near infrared light. It's naturally producing it. So that's one example of others. And also, like, the light therapy is increasing blood flow and blood circulation. It's also giving the cell more energy, right? That's one of the direct effects. So when we do that and the cell is trying to detox at the same time, it now can detox. It has more energy to do so. It's less stressful on the cell and on the whole body to do this detoxification. So the light therapy makes the detoxification more gentle and more effective. And I would say more accessible, especially to people who are, physically limited for like some people are very heat sensitive, people with autoimmune issues, they have thermoregulatory limitations, and they can handle this gentle heat because the light itself is heating you. It doesn't have to be this air that's 200 degrees, Fahrenheit. That's very kind of claustrophobic feeling. It's much more gentle, but there's clearly a synergy between the two. So it's interesting to use the two together. I think each one makes the other like more effective.
It's interesting because Brian and I were talking offline before we started the podcast, and we've just refurbished our house and we've created a sort of well-being area. And in our well-being area, we've got a traditional sauna with traditional stones. We've also bought an array of your lights. So exactly what you say, we turn the sauna on for about half an hour before we get in. And as we get in, we turn on the red light. And I tell you, it kind of tops and tails my day. I start my day off with my luxury start to the day is making myself a latte coffee. And I can't tell you how towards the end of the day, Karen and I sit in the sauna for half an hour and just chill. And it's absolutely wonderful. Fantastic. Let's talk about the evidence base though, because I said in my introduction, my interest is all-cause mortality. And you'll be close to the detail than I am, but there's this fantastic, is it a Finnish study of, I think they've studied several thousand men over 20 years, and they compared with all the confounders dealt with. So there's something in healthcare called health user bias. In other words, you pick people who do a particular thing and they're a lot healthier, and you assume that the one is related to the other. But actually, it turns out people who eat an apple a day also exercise more, also have a better diet, also sleep better, also have better education. It's very easy to assume it's the apple. But this study is fantastic. And I think directionally they compared men who sauna once a day with men who never sauna. And I think it's a 15% reduction in all-cause mortality. What's fascinating to me is when you look at any other, because obviously I know all about drugs. Generally speaking, as you increase the dose of a drug, so if a drug has an effect and you double the dose of the drug, most people naively assume that as you double the dose, you double the effects. Actually, when you double the dose, you might get a 10% increase in the benefits, but you might get a 40 or 50% increase in the side effects. And I'm particularly seeing this at the moment with the use of the GLP-1s, the Wegovys, Ozempics, where people think, if some makes me lose weight, then I just need to take more and more and more. And they're ending up on huge doses with horrendous side effects and still raging hunger. And of course, now they're trapped because it's costing them a fortune, right? They've destroyed their metabolism. And as soon as they stop the drug, it's 10 times worse. So I think it's really important to understand the example I always give. I mean, if we accept the old tenet that an apple a day keeps the doctor away, I mean, probably it doesn't. It probably give you diabetes, but let's just go with it, right? No one would eat 10 apples a day, right? You know that's not sensible, and yet that's what's happened with medication. What's fascinating to me is that as you increase the regularity of the sauna, you see almost linear progression in terms of reduction in all-cause mortality.
Yeah. That study was published by Laukanen, and it's 2,000 Finnish men that were followed for first either 15 or 20 years at first, and they looked at heart attack and heart disease, cardiovascular disease and heart failure. And not only did they see that the use of one sauna a week drastically reduced the incidences of heart attack and cardiac disease, what they interestingly noted, which is what you just called out, is that there was another group that they had used the sauna 3 times a week. And those had a proportionally greater reduction in all-cause mortality. The ones that are using the sauna 3 days a week. And what's really interesting about that study is they continue to follow them for another 7 years. And then they republished. The first one was like 2014 or 2015. And then they republished in like 2021 or 2022, looking at the same test populations, the same 3 groups, but instead looking at dementia outcomes. And they found the same trend, that those who used sauna 1 day a week had a significant reduction in risk of development of dementia or dementia-related disease versus those that never used the sauna. But those guys that were using the sauna 3 days a week had that same additional significant decrease over the 1-day-a-weekers in the risk of development of dementia. So the more you use the sauna, the better. And where is the sweet spot? Well, I personally use the sauna like 4 or 5 days a week. And I'm careful to remineralize myself really effectively. I consume a fair amount of really healthy salt, and I do take certain supplements like Shilajit and other things. And I do incorporate the use of natural binders like some of Dr. Group's global healing toxin binders and charcoal and things like that. But it's that 3 days a week, I would say, is if you can manage to get a sauna at home, is really the minimum to stay healthy nowadays. Just doing once a week is helpful, and you're way better off than people who don't use it.
Yeah.
But you can use it even more than that, which is what's fascinating. And actually, there's some interesting, fairly new research in using a sauna twice a day. So you do a session in the morning, you wait a few hours, you do a session in the afternoon sometime, and the amount of growth hormone response you get is tremendous, tremendously increased. And so it's this idea of once in a while really stressing the body out and saying, okay, and you're not doing this every day, and then maybe you're taking a break the next day or for the next 2 days, but for one day you're doing this intense thing where you're sauning multiple times a day, and it has even more benefits. So it's all about also varying what the body's exposed to and what the body experiences, and not routinely doing the same thing, just as you shouldn't routinely eat the same, chicken and rice, chicken and rice, chicken and rice forever. The body wants variety. But it is interesting that sauna and light therapy, both of them, you can get very high doses of them. And as long as it's within the context of a healthy lifestyle, it's just only benefit.
I think I'm right that the 3 to 5 times a week showed a 55% reduction in all-cause mortality, something like that.
Yeah, it's something like that. I always forget the numbers, but it's really shocking.
It's like, I mean, there is no drug. There is no drug or any combination of drugs that gets within a million miles of that. Like you think what healthcare systems are spending on medication. And I did a deep search to try and find a drug that would come close to matching it. And I would say a drug that produces a 5% all-cause mortality reduction would be regarded as an incredibly successful drug.
Right. Yeah.
This is 55%. There is no drug. I challenge anyone to come back to me and find any drug or combination of medications that will get within 25% or even 10% of the benefits of photobiomodulation and sauna. Okay, so we've gone on a bit longer than I expected, Brian, and I've got loads of questions that I haven't got around to asking you. It's been absolutely fascinating, but there is one closing question I'd like to ask. If we had this conversation in 10 years' time, what do you hope would have changed in terms of the mainstream medical attitudes to sauna and photobiomodulation? And that's within the context that, like, I knew nothing about this. I think you probably stimulated me on this journey, and then I started, and you challenged my understanding, and then I went away and did a deep dive, and now it seems to be everywhere. We've got Huberman talking about it all the time, Peter Attia talking about it, all the influencers who I really are up there with the science and who I deeply respect. And it seems to be just everywhere at the moment. So I kind of feel that we're on the cusp of something. Where do you think we'll be in 10 years?
Yeah, I'd like to see sauna and light therapy, particularly what we do, where it's incandescent, so it's more biologically coherent. It's a more natural form of light, and it's a more, I would say, more therapeutic, effective form of heat therapy. I'd like to see them being used as a primary tool. Right now, photobiomodulation is used by allopathic medicine to heal people after chemotherapy and after radiation. When instead, let's look at these two tools as true preventative tools that can be used not just in conjunction, but prior to and in a preventive sense, before anyone is even considering any pharmaceutical medication or any, intensive intervention like chemotherapy and radiation, which are don't have very good success rates. And that's something that also I think people are slowly wising up to this, but in the US, the number 3 cause of death is iatrogenic death,
Drugs.
death by doctor, death by
Yep.
medical error.
Yep.
And it's not just like people taking the wrong prescriptions. It's doctors.
It's polypharmacy, interventions on top of each other. It's not as bad in the UK, but it's still here. We know, for example, if you pick the care of the elderly wards, these people are very elderly and very frail, and they've usually got multiple morbidities and polypharmacy. 20 or 30% of those admissions are at least drug related, not in the sense of using illicit drugs, but the legitimate use of allopathic medication with the attendant side effects. So, yeah, the
So
the human misery that we're causing, it's why I became the pharmacist that gave up drugs.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're to be commended for that. We need more of you guys to come to this natural side. That's what I'd like to see. I'd like to see a shift in perspective wherein people consider the use of light therapy, the use of sauna as a means to stay healthy so that they don't ever get into a situation, where you use the
Where they need
analogy
people like
of the
me.
car before. We don't have to wait till the transmission blows out, although that seems to be so common for everybody that, you really need a big slap in the face before we wake up.
Yeah.
But when we use light therapy, we use sauna, we can just keep ourselves in a really strong physical and energetic state to where when we do encounter challenges in life, we can overcome them. What I find funny about the car analogy is kind of the difference between a car and a human body is when your oil filter clogs up in your car, you throw it away. You put a new oil filter on. But in the human body, it's our liver. And we don't throw it away. We actually regenerate it. So the analogy only goes so far. The difference is in biology, we can actually regenerate and repair all the parts and make them brand new again. And light therapy and sauna are two of the perhaps one of the most powerful ways of doing that.
Fantastic. In fact, I think that's a wonderful high note to end upon. And I've taken up more of your time than I intended. Thank you. I've learned a lot from you. It's been fascinating. Thank you very much. If people want to follow up with you or follow more of the science, where's the best place?
Yeah, on sauna.space, our website, a lot of great content on there. We have the spectrums and you can understand a lot more of the light and the heat therapy. We have some cool educational animations. And also on social, on Sauna, at Sauna Space, on Instagram and YouTube and TikTok. There's a lot of great content on there where I talk about this and that, and we deep dive into a lot of things. Definitely a lot of beautiful content there. And if you have any questions about our products or actually the science itself, we have an amazing customer care team in-house. You can call, email, and chat us on the weekdays, and we're here to help.
Fantastic. And I'll be in touch.
Thank you, Graham.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed the podcast and want to find out more, join our Wellness and Prolongevity Facebook group. Don't forget to subscribe and follow so you never miss an episode, and maybe share to friends and family who might benefit. Finally, if you think you might need help with diabetes, heart disease, or any of the other diseases we discuss, then book a free consultation with Graham. There's absolutely no charge for this, and we would never put you under any pressure. What do you have to lose? Bye for now, and see you for the next episode.